Randall Crowder, Chief Operating Officer of Funware. Catch me on the Jesse T Show.
I love the first takes. They're always the best, and you crushed it.
You know that we can roll into this, but no, the funny story. Clint Eastwood always does first takes.
Does he?
Out like actors will go in and be like, all right, we're gonna work this out through the day. They'll start doing like Matt Damon talks about this a lot, like during Invictus, like he's trying to do a South African accent.
Yeah.
Up. He starts talking, and they're like, all right, let's go. And and Matt Damon was like, wait, hold on, like I don't think I nailed that. He's like, do you want to do another shoot? And Clint Eastwood's like, you just want to waste everybody's time?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I guess let's go. Like they just left.
I've heard this recently, and we'll just go from there, man. We're rolling. So I've heard Matt Damon say that very specific thing, and then he also talked about how DVD sales have really affected. I don't know if you've heard this part of it too, but DVD sales have affected the aftermarket monetary gains for a lot of these companies, because back in the day, you had, for a certain time period, movies would roll into, DVDs, and then there's this huge market to buy after for DVDs. He said there's like a massive chunk of income that like they had to get, figure out how to capture. Have you heard that too?
Yeah. I guess, it's business landscape, right? Like I think, I think about this all the time where it's like all these unintended consequences of all these other ecosystem things. Like I think so many people think of good idea, maybe raise money or bootstrap, sell for a lot of money, go buy island. And it's like, oh, no, it's a lot more complicated than that. Yeah. There's a lot of things that you got to think about. And like, I remember one of the very first investments I ever did was in a medical device company. And we can get back to my background here in a second. But like, I literally had doctors tell me, yes, that product is better. It would mean that the patient is less time under anesthesia, a smaller incision. We'd still get the exact same fusion of two vertebral bodies. But, and I'll never tell this publicly, I'll never tell it if I'm being recorded, I make more money because of the way healthcare is reimbursed doing that other procedure, longer time on the table, more hardware going into the body. I'm going to tell people if they ask, I'm better trained on that. But the reality is I make more money on that. And You're like thinking, oh my God, what? Like I'm telling you this is better for the patient, and you're telling me this is worse for the patient, but you make more money. And so you're going to do that instead. And it wasn't until the business of you can get away from fee for service and you can get more towards where people are trying to go, where you have like case rates, where now you want that margin. Unless you understand the whole business of care, just having a better widget, it ain't going to do it.
I could tell we're going to be able to have multiple conversations and go deep. Like just that one piece right there, we could talk forever. And so thinking about, healthcare throughout the world, there's different parts in the East, in the Far East, where medical professionals are incentivized by actually healing people and not keeping them on the Western part of the world, which is here in the United States, is one of the areas where they want people to stay sick. I mean, look at Big Pharma. Big Pharma's job is to keep people taking their pills, taking their product. And the way to do that is to not truly heal them. And this whole analogy goes back to, if they had the cure for cancer, would they release it? Because how big is that business? Trillions of dollars, billions of dollars a year, I'm assuming. And I've stepped into my own, taking a lot of my own healing back, because I think I've alluded this to you, but I've started a really deep spiritual journey over the last 3 years, and it's taken me around the world. And I sat with plant medicines and sweat lodges and everything in between, breath work. And I've gotten some beautiful insights that I am a healer, that I am a creator, I'm powerful. And we all are. We all have these abilities to heal ourselves if we have great things like nutrition and sleep and movement and great relationships and things that bring us joy. I mean, these things can actually heal you. Not to say there's not a place for Western medicine, but at the end of the day, a lot of these companies are in business by keeping us sick. And for us to understand that we can take charge of our own life, and for the most part, a lot of the stuff that we can heal before it ever even starts with lifestyle choices. So I think it's a beautiful reminder that yes, while there is a place for medicine here in the United States, we have to look through the veil a little bit and understand that, is this going to keep me sick or is this going to actually heal me?
Yeah, man, you said so much there, and there's so much to unpack. And I always think one of the challenges that we face as a society is always needing a bad guy. We, and we live, I always say there's duality in everything, at least the way we're kind of trained. It's Black Lives Matter. No, all lives matter. It's Republicans, it's Democrats, it's, Western medicine, Eastern medicine. And the reality is nothing is that simple. It's not, this isn't machine code. It's not binary. And so integrated medicine, how do you take the best of both worlds? My mom just had, she has lung cancer. My dad died from lung cancer. My mom got it like 8 months later. She's like, what the hell? Now I got to deal with this. Luckily, we caught it early, so we did a resection. But that was a hard journey for her. Like, she is all about natural, and she's like, I'm gonna juice. And I'm like, Mom, that I get where your head's at. I like where you're at from a holistic perspective.
Yes.
A lot of people that get cancer, because we had already figured out it was a very small nodule. Most people would kill to have the opportunity to address cancer with surgery. Let's do both. Let's do the surgery. And then let's also do all this holistic, stuff that we know that you can do, and let's eat right and drink, the juices. Let's do both. And so fortunately, I was able to convince her of that. But I think the challenge people have so oftentimes is it's all or nothing.
Yes.
And, people that are in our healthcare system, the crazy thing is they're not waking up every day thinking, I'm going to just, abuse these patients. And they truly believe what they're doing is right.
Yes.
And everybody who doesn't do that truly believes what they're doing is right. And so you really have to kind of have this open heart and open perspective to really think about, what is the best for you, and then educate yourself and be open to someone else's perspective, and not be so quick to be like, oh, that's voodoo, or, oh, that's this. I mean, it's not, the placebo effect is so common in Eastern medicine, but it's a Western perspective. Like, your ability to think about being healed is literally the definition of the placebo effect. Yet then when somebody else comes and tells you, hey, we want you to meditate, we want you to think positive about healing, you're like, oh, that's stupid. Well, what do you mean that's stupid? It's scientific fact, but people just love to make somebody else the bad guy.
I agree. And, it's what you're alluding to is just stacking your deck, right? Whether it's Eastern medicine, Western medicine, if it's mindset, if it's habits, if it's beliefs. I mean, if you can just take some of all of that, right, in that season, and add it to, the ability to say, I'm going to put all these things in place that maybe weren't before, and I'm going to fast forward my healing, or at least, rev it up to where I can put myself in a state to heal. Yeah. And it's absolutely true. I mean, I don't think that there's many, I believe that most people have good hearts, and whether it's trauma, whether it's ego, whether it's outside influences that kind of force people to do the wrong thing. Sometimes I think that at the end of the day, most people have a really good heart. That's just my belief. That's my belief for the world. And as far as I think what you're alluding to, like with big pharma and some of these other companies, there are these systems in place that, kind of make things a little bit more perverse, especially you see in government, right? Like government, there's a lot of people that are forced to, take lobby money. They're forced to do this because they're going to get more campaign boost and whatever it is. And so they're kind of playing this weird game of dealing with the devil, so to speak, right? And this happens across the board. It happens in the medical profession too, because you have, and again, I'm not going to go out here with a sign and picket big pharma. I choose not to be in that world. I choose to be more holistic with my stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of these guardrails have been put in place to say, hey, listen, we have this rep that'll come knock on your door. We're going to incentivize you to pass out these pills. Long story short, it may be good for some, it may not be good for others, but you have to be able to think for yourself. And that's the biggest thing, is if you can choose to have an original free thought, which isn't as easy as people think. A lot of times I have to sit and think, I'm like, where did this thought come from? Did I hear it somewhere? Like, did it just kind of manifest? Is it part of the collective, or was it my thought? And a lot of times, I'll be honest, most thoughts that you come up with aren't necessarily yours. And you have to really kind of peel back the onion and be like, okay. And so from there, then you can start making decisions to think for yourself. So I think that there's so much, as you alluded to, from politics to medicine to everything out there, everything that can be construed for power. What do you use that power for? Do you use the power for good or for bad? So I think that we're in a really interesting time these days to kind of figure all that out.
Ain't that the truth? What's the old saying? Everyone's the hero of their own story. The one example I always use with this about just kind of perverse thinking is, if there, we always say if there was a cure for cancer, but like, what about AIDS? Is there, granted, we have enough expensive medicine that people can now live, a full life and not,
beautiful.
But you don't see any of that in Africa, for example. And like, if you could cure it like that, I could absolutely see somebody in pharma burying that cure. Mm-hmm. And I would look at it like, well, you just want to profit off, what keeps you, the cocktail, if you will.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, they would probably convince themselves of some story that, well, if it was cured, we would have other issues. You have that, AIDS, unfortunately, is a population check for a lot of third world countries. And then what if that population check wasn't there? Well, then you'd have famine and starvation and war. So I'm not burying this cure because I'm a bad person. I'm doing it because I'm playing God and
need to cull the herd, so to speak.
People think like that. And
they
so
do.
It's like, how do you get people to think about, maybe making better decisions for society when they think they're doing the right thing for society? And it's like, yeah, like Hitler thought the same thing, And it's scary where people go with their justifications.
We have to understand that we're the creators of this reality, and we can get into what reality is, but at the end of the day, we really do have the ability to dictate our world to a degree, right? And to affect change that we see fit. And so it's the intention. What's the intention? Is the intention to be of service, to be a healer, to be a guide, to be and a lot of times we do have to make tough decisions, especially in the theater of war. Like thinking about, I served, years ago. I didn't actually see any direct combat, but I was around the vibration of, this could turn into something much bigger than just being over across, the water. This could come to our home front, and it has on a few occasions. And it's like, so what is the intention behind how we handle those situations? And a lot of it comes down to, really, is that intention pure, or is there some sort of like nefarious thought behind it? Yeah. Right. And whether you're, like you were alluding to, more of the elitist mindset, like we have to cull the herd, we have to, protect Elon Musk. I've been kind of loosely following him here and there, and he says some really interesting things. Not everything I agree with, but some things I do. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about, is like, if you were to stick every single human being in the state of New York, I think it was even the city of New York, he's like, you could fit the entire world in one state. He's like, we're not going to run out of land. It's a matter of who owns land and what they're doing with the land. And it's, he's obviously wants to get us off of Earth to be interplanetary, but at the end of the day, he's even talking about like a lot of this stuff is manageable, and we have to make the right decisions now to make sure the future's set up for our kids and our loved ones.
Yeah. They talk about that with food supply all the time. Like the amount of food that we waste just in the United States could feed everybody 3 square meals, a day. And then you start thinking like, okay, well, again, back to the argument, what would you do with, population control and housing? And like, there are solutions, and you're 100% right. It's sad when there's such obvious solutions and we don't kind of, follow them. But, I think just sitting back, you're talking about war, one of the things that always fascinates me is like the human condition. Like maybe it's anthropology, but like, what makes like a My Lai happen? Like what makes an Abu Ghraib happen? Like, but then, what makes 3 planes going down, in 9/11, and 1 plane, people going, not on my fucking watch.
Right.
Roll. And so it's like, it's always interesting to me, this function of, groupthink or going with the herd. And I look a lot at like, even like what happened with World War II, you had a lot of, or how we did it with slavery as well. It's like, these people who you kind of think, oh, well, okay, maybe it'll get better. And then all of a sudden, like you find yourself in a situation where you're like, how do we get from here to here? First it was, limited travel. Then it was move, Jews to the ghetto. Then it's just, mass executions. And you're like, the whole way people just kind of kept thinking like, oh, well, maybe it'll get better. And like, what does it take for, people to kind of take control of their own destiny, either in small situations, like, and I remember one of the things that somebody said very, always important to me when we first went into Iraq. Old Sergeant Major that had been there a little bit early with Special Forces. And he goes, listen, he was kind of doing the briefing right before we crossed the border and invaded. And he was like, look, here's something you got to understand. And I don't mean, these people to be insensitive, but I'm saying, the country you're about to go in is not like the country you're coming from. They have been ruled by a dictator their entire lives. And so more often than not, you will find they're either at your feet or at your throat.
Yes.
There's no middle ground because they've never understood a middle ground. And so you may want to come over and have good intentions of handing out candy, but eventually enough of your friends are going to get hurt or killed that you're going to be tired of handing out candy. And that's when you have to search your soul and understand you can't cross that line. Yep. You know, you might get, pissed off and like shove some kid, and that kid might go tell his brother that he got shoved. And that might be all that brother needs to go plant an IED and kill somebody else who had nothing to do with it. Yep. And so you've always got to really search your soul and be like, in this moment, am I being the best version of myself? And, what are the long-term kind of ripple effects of my actions? Yep. And I hope that people learn that, because like I feel like if I was in a situation where I was in a village and people were just killing villagers, I'd be like, not on my watch. Like, no way. Like, I'm not going to sit by and watch that shit. But then it keeps happening, and you keep thinking like, what about the human condition allows people to participate in like the cruelty and the worst part of humanity and not say something? And that's scary to me.
It's really hard, because you would assume that people, going back to people having good hearts, that's one thing as far as like the majority, I would imagine, of people. But you go back to assuming that, if someone has a good heart, they'll do the right thing. But what is the right thing? The right thing may be completely different for you and me versus somebody that's not even from the same country. Yeah. And like you said, what have they had to experience? What have they gone through that's led them to this ability to make decisions, like you said, at your knees or at your throat? And it's a real mindset shift and a perspective shift to really kind of, like you said earlier before we could hit record, is to empathize to a degree with their situation. Maybe not have to agree with it, maybe not have to approve of it or back it up, but at the same time understand that they're from a war-torn, third world type country where they don't have the options or the ability to go out and do the things that we do. So the things we take for granted, like you said, food waste, throwing away enough food to where we could feed 3 meals a day. I mean, that's even that alone, people will kill for food. Like back, wherever you are, if you have scarcity and you have a scarcity mindset and you've been abused and led to be, mongered with fear, people will do what they need to do to survive. Yeah. And if they're in a survival state, it's fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. And so talking about your experience over there, to delve a little bit into that part of your career. So what was your MOS? What was your day-to-day like? How long were you there? And what were some of the experiences and teachings you came back with?
Yeah. So went to West Point for undergrad. Not brave whatsoever. I went in before 9/11. And so had no idea what I was getting into. Rumsfeld was downsizing the military. Mm-hmm. And so September 11th was my senior year. And it's funny, I still remember, we thought, I had a friend that went with me. We thought we were probably going to get, people were literally getting paid like $100,000 just to give up their commission. So like, wow, was not thinking brave at all. But really actually kind of, I think the experience of an academy, like it resonated with me. And so I actually enjoyed it, but still had no intention of ever thinking I was going to go to war. 9/11, September, senior year, it happened, going to my first class, and you couldn't make this stuff up. I just happened to have this like old curmudgeon-y like colonel with like a gravel voice and an iron jaw, like literally what you would imagine out of a cartoon. And we all sit down and he's kind of looking at us. I think he jumped into Grenada, and like he like is looking around and he goes, "Well, cadets, you're all going to war." I was like, oh God. Stomach just drops, and you're like, because he's right. And it's like all best laid plans, everything we thought we were going to do, the world changed in that one moment, and it changed. So, went over in 2003, again in 2005. First one was 13 months, second one was 15 months. Iraq both times, Fallujah the first time, kind of around the Bakuba area, the second time. It was eye-opening. In 2003, we had some of the heaviest casualties. I was trained as a 13 Fox. So I was a forward observer with an infantry unit, and then ended up whenever we had a bunch of people, get hurt. A couple people died. And so we were so early, we didn't have like really the backfills set up yet or any of the supply chains set up yet. And so because I had been Ranger School, they ended up just assigning me a platoon. And so ended up just doing a lot of kind of infantry stuff, but still got to call for fire and do all the field artillery stuff as well. Nothing on the gun line, but all kind of with units calling for fire or close air support. So, it was an eye-opening experience in a lot of different ways. I don't talk a whole lot about like, specifics or details, but like the things that I love talking about is like one, the need to shift the idea of leadership from kind of the macro to the micro. We had never fought a war like this before. Like we got ambushed the first day we were in country. And so like within like hours, most of the, NCOs and then kind of captain and under, we all had more, direct fire experience than anybody giving us orders. And
wow.
So it was this weird, dynamic where you'd start to have this, we knew more about what was going on, outside the wire than any of the colonels or generals who were telling us kind of what to do. So we were doing it, but they also started pushing that decision-making down, which was nice. You had that small unit leadership. So we would go outside the wire and just walk around. And we used to do these MIT teams, and we used to kind of take a page from the Marines and just live in the cities and just work with people, which was, a way to kind of get to know the people more. Rather than kind of constantly going back inside the wire and not having any clue what was going on. So kind of that constant presence. But watching kids, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, like watching how they handled themselves, it was just amazing. You have, 18-year-old kids negotiating ceasefires or setting up, CASEVACs or setting up civil affair, med tents or something. And just like all these different, you think, God, I just saw you, screaming at your buddy about some stripper that you try to date or something. And like, now you're, negotiating a sit down with some tribal lord. It was a great reminder about, potential is not just your resume. It's not just your title. There's potential in all of us. And as a leader, it's kind of incumbent upon us to explore, who has that potential? Where is that potential? Do you give the right people, seats at the table? Do you make sure there's enough seats at the table? And it's not just the kid who went to Harvard or the kid with all the medals or the kid who's real loud about what he or she does. Like, I mean, there's potential everywhere. And it's incumbent upon leaders to figure out that. So I thought that was special. And it's like, cool things that like people came up with, the ingenuity, always fascinated me. Like before, DARPA figured out ground penetrating radar and a bunch of other cool, whiz bang shit. We used to have our mechanics mount these huge metal bars on the front of our Humvees with little chains. And the whole goal was like, well, if, we were going to cross passive infrared, ideally it would blow the front of the Humvee, not the cab. And it would just offset it by, 10 feet or so, just enough to survive. Then they started daisy chaining their IEDs, and it was always trying to come up with who could be more ingenious about how to defeat some sort of threat. But that wasn't DARPA research coming up with that. There was some mechanics being like, hey, I got an idea.
Ingenuity, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So I loved watching that. And so I think that like one of the things, my biggest takeaways from a service was, if nobody's ever read it, there's a book called Startup Nation. And it's all about what the role service played in Israel with their entrepreneurial ecosystem, with their innovation ecosystem. And I think America's kind of lost sight of that. Like we have trained some incredible people in some incredible situations, and then they get out and they don't really know how to apply that. Like, do I have to be just a security contractor? If I was an XO, do I just go get into supply chain management? Like, no, you can do anything. You can go work on Goldman. You can go work at Goldman, go work on Wall Street. You can go work. You can do anything you want to do if you have served in our military, especially, during the last 25 years, because the ability to think outside of the box, organizational leadership, team building, collaboration, working under high pressure situations, all of that is what's required to be successful in the private sector. And so I hope that people, appreciate and learn not only what, veterans have done, but veterans appreciate and learn what they've done so they can sell themselves. Because I think it's remarkable what we've done. And all you got to do, if you don't believe me, watch Russia, man. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like I would tell anybody watching this, and I never thought about it until I started watching troop movements, both dismounted and mounted in Ukraine. And my wife's Ukraine, my newborn on the way will be half Ukrainian. And so I have a special affinity for Ukraine, but it reminds me of what America's done, for the last 25 years, hell, almost back to 90, we have waged war. We were very good at it. And I hope that we never have to use it. But to be honest, it should give people comfort. We would work through Russia's military in a weekend. Like our military is so good at this. Like if what Ukraine is doing is beating someone like Russia, our military is lights out right now. Like we are better trained, better supplied, better equipped, and better capable of waging war. If it doesn't go nuclear, there is not an army, including China, that could stand up against us right now.
Yeah, it should give people some peace and to understand, what we meaning those have volunteered to be a part of the armed forces, right? And signed our name on the line and didn't know everything that we were getting into, right? Like had an idea, right? You have an idea, but you don't really know until you get in there. And how could you ever, predict that when you were going to, OCS and you were going to come out, you had a trajectory in your mind, then all of a sudden we're going to war and you're like, what? So, I mean, that there is a bravery to at least, telling someone that you can basically have my life for X amount of time is what you're saying. And you have to follow orders, and some that you agree with, some that you don't. And you have to, make shifts in your life that, maybe not be the most comfortable or amenable to your way of living. And then you have to potentially go fight and get some combat experience. And that'll do things to a lot of people. And so there's a lot that comes back with that. And so I think that as far as a nation, yes, our military is second to none, and all the different aspects of our military and different divisions and different tiers of our military. And knowing that we do have the world's strongest military is so powerful. And that's what really gives us that ability to be a world power. And it's really the military that backs us up. Yes, there's so many other pieces to it, but at the end of the day, like you said, if we were to go against Russia outside of nuclear war, we would look really good. And this is where they start colluding with each other, where you have, Russia and China and some other countries that were like, well, you know what, if we're not going to be the biggest guy in the park, we're going to try to team together. And at the end of the day, I got to hope that people don't go that route, be prepared. Right. Because hope's not a strategy. Be prepared with the finest fighting force in the world, but hope that shit never hits the fan that bad that you're going to have to see another world war. And you continue to see what we've been seeing. But talk about a little bit about your transition, because, there's a lot of people, not all, but there's a lot of people that come out of the military that kind of have an identity crisis. It's like, I've just done this. I've hung my hat on this. This is who I am. This jersey, this uniform that I've worn, so to speak, this team I've been a part of, this sometimes prestige, sometimes not, right? Depending on where you are in the world. Yeah. This is no longer going to be a thing. And now I've exited out of the military. Now I'm going into civilian life. And there's so much transition there in so many ways. What was that transition like for you? What did you go from in the military doing to civilian life?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, you have, if nobody's ever read Gates of Fire, I definitely recommend reading it. But it talks a lot about kind of the Battle of Thermopylae and how Spartans approached war. And
beautiful.
Part of that book where they talk about kind of having two tickets, and you can kind of have one part of you that goes somewhere and does terrible things and things that you would never want to really share or talk about, but you don't bring that home. Like you come home and that's what you did, and that's not who you are. It's just what you did. And so that was always always kind of sat in my mind. And I kind of always remember thinking, I don't want this experience, as much as I learned from it, and as terrible as it was at times, I don't want this to be what defines me. Like I want people to be like, man, he was a great father or a great husband or, a great, humanitarian or whatever. I don't want to be, 55 years old going, man, back in my day, once upon a time in Iraq, I did these things. I don't want that to be my only story.
Right.
And so, for me, it was motivating. And I kind of felt like I was left behind a little bit. So like whenever I was getting out, like when I do something, I'm all in. And so nobody knew I was going to get out. I think a lot of people thought, hey, he's going to go be a general one day. And so I got a lot of heat, from, my brigade commander and all the way up to division commander about like, dude, what's going on? Like, I thought you were staying in, but it was never my intention to stay in. But like, when I'm going to do something, I'm going to be all in. I wanted that not to be what defined me though. And I wanted to cut my teeth in the private sector. And so, I kind of thought, all right, well, man, I'm so behind. Everybody else is on Wall Street doing $1 billion deals. Like, man, I gotta get to work. I gotta catch up to do. So it kind of for me, it was like a little bit of a sense of insecurity. Like I was transitioning out, not, it could have been crippling one way or the other, right? Like I felt like I was behind, and rather than, kind of let that consume me and feel like, God, I gave myself to this thing and I did all these things for my country, and now I'm stuck in this place, which I think happens to a lot of transitioning veterans. Yes. I use it as motivation. I was like, man, this is not going to break me. Let's go. And so I did a lot all at once, not because I was some hard charging entrepreneur, but like, I felt like I was playing catch up. And people call it like the imposter syndrome. Like I was literally,
yes,
I got out and was like doing, I think at one point I had like 8 different business cards, and it was like, I wasn't an entrepreneur because like, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know any other way. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody would have hired me. Like I started, starting my own shit just so I would have a job. I wanted to, at first I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but then I didn't have anything that I was passionate about. And then I basically wanted to I started thinking, well, if I don't have anything I'm passionate about, and I want to be an entrepreneur, maybe I should learn the investor side of things, so that like I know kind of, know your enemy kind of thing. And so I was like, all right, well, I got into venture capital to be a better entrepreneur, but then fell in love with venture capital. But who the fuck's going to hire me to be a venture capitalist? I don't have any experience doing anything. And so I started my own fund, and it was always like, I was always starting stuff in order to do something that I wanted to do, with this little bit of insecurity that if I don't start it, no one's going to hire me to do it because I don't have the qualifications to do it. So I was like an entrepreneur almost out of fear of rejection. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of look back on my entire career has been collecting jobs I'm not qualified for. I always lead with value, and you can't tell me nothing. Like I'm like, I will find a way. And I think that was always the spirit of, a volunteer armed forces is, you find a way. And I think something that you said that I think is very special to me now is I hate that it's a Will Smith quote, because I'm hoping that it's somebody else, because now Will Smith's kind of a cornball for the way he acted. But he still got some great quotes out there. So I'm going to give him credit for the quotes that he had. And I think somebody else has a version of this, but God placed the best things in life on the other side of terror. And that is so true, because being willing to push through that fear is so important, because like what you said, I volunteered to be in the military. I'm being told to deploy or go do something that's really scary. And you have that moment. I don't care who you're talking to. It's like, maybe I should just fake an injury. Maybe I could go to Canada.
Go to Canada
for a couple seconds. You're like, I don't want to go get shot at, and it's,
who does? Yeah.
And so being willing to push through that and do it anyways, sometimes multiple times. I look at it like right now, I'm a runner, and I love running. And
Same.
More important than running is that momentary mental struggle to get up and run.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have to do it. And granted, if I miss a day or two, it's not that big of a deal. And maybe it's raining, or maybe I don't want to do it, or maybe I'm achy, and I'll go through that mental battle. Just get up and fucking run.
Yep.
And then every time I do it, I love it. And every time I'm done, I'm so glad I did it.
Yes.
But the next morning, same thing.
No matter what. There's some days you look forward to, but some days you don't. Have you gotten into David Goggins at all?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I could sense it. Yeah. Goggins kind of got me running a couple of years ago. And, I went from playing my sports my whole life, but not running on purpose. Like running was a byproduct of playing sports. Football, baseball, basketball, some running more than others. But I never actually went out and said, I'm going to go run a few miles. I never did that until I was 38. I'm about to be 41. And, I wouldn't even finish 2 miles without stopping and walking a little bit. And then I started getting pretty good at it. And to the point where I was running in my age group of, 35 to 40 at one point, and placing first, second, third from regular 5Ks to mud runs and all sorts of fun shit. And Goggins was a big proponent at that time for so many reasons, but with the running, he really helped, because he's got these things where he's talking about the 40% rule. Yep. When you think you've maxed out, you really only touched 40% of your potential.
100%.
And it's like, well, shit, if I feel like I'm maxing out and I get another 60%, well, I better get going, It's like, and then I can hear Goggins sometimes, and he talks about the cookie jar, and it's like all this shit that's happened to you in your life. Sometimes pull out a fucking cookie from this metaphorical cookie jar and say, you know what, bitch, meaning me, which you shouldn't talk to yourself like that. But if you do, to say, I'm going to accomplish this because, you know, I got bullied when I was a kid and I don't want to get bullied anymore. So I'm going to fucking push through this. And so Goggins has been a beautiful cornerstone in my development over the last few years because he's just raw truth, man. And I got a buddy who's in the spiritual world and he's like, Goggins is basically like a Buddha, but he's a very masculine Buddha. Yeah. He doesn't fuck around and he's straight to the point. And he pisses people off because he calls them out and they feel the truth when they hear it. It's like, are they ready to hear it? Are they willing to hear it? And if so, what are they going to do with it? And Goggins has absolutely changed my life, man.
I think it's so powerful. And I know he gets a lot of flack in a different way, but like, I will admit, I vibe with Jordan Peterson. Like the way he talks about certain topics, he's not taking a position so much as he's trying to just to pull back your own bullshit, the bullshit stories you tell yourself. And I think, you know, one of the quotes I heard the other day, which I really liked, not the other day, but I've heard it a while ago, but I always hear it is, you know, it's not about, you know, the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness of pursuit.
Yes.
And like I did the exact same thing with like running. Like when you fall in love, there's another quote that's like, you know, the man who, you know, loves to walk will always walk further than the man who loves the destination.
Yes.
And if you fall in love with that idea of just, you know, I like running, like it's spiritual. You know, when I'm running, I do my best thinking.
Yes.
You know, get out of my own head. It's just you and the trail. And there's something pure about it because at any point you could stop. At any point you could, you know, skip it. At any point you could quit. You could run slower. Like no one's going to know. It's just you.
But you
so there's just something very pure about that where it's like, yeah, but I'll know. And it's like, I'm going to do it. And it's for me. And so I think that's wildly important for all things that we do. How do you be the best version of yourself? How do you, you know, kind of live into the expectation for yourself? Because like, you know, you're the one that's going to let you down. Like, you know, a lot of times people aren't going to know you didn't do an extra rep, you didn't run a little bit faster, you didn't, you know, and I just don't want to sandbag my life. And I think that's kind of been, you know, I love when the people are like Goggins, which is in your face about like, look, you know, don't be a pussy.
Yeah, pretty much. And and the thing is, he comes by it honestly. Like he calls himself out first before he'll call anyone else out. Yeah. And he's another echelon. Like I don't aspire to be like that. I don't need to be like that, but I do take pages from his playbook. And it's absolutely been a beautiful, you know, for me, one of the biggest things he taught me, the biggest thing over running, over discipline, over any of that stuff is sharing my story and being able to come out and say, I've had these tremendous life experiences, both, you know, hard and beautiful. And it's brought me to this point today. And if I share this story with you, a lot of things happen. Number one, it frees me from my own persecution, my own judgment, my own shame about some of the things that maybe weren't the best. And then it also helps me to connect and relate to people on a much deeper level than I could have if I didn't share those things. And having that, now it's become a thing where like what you're doing and you're talking about yourself sharing the journey, it's become so I don't want to say nonchalant, but it's so much easier. And it's freed up this space in my heart, in my mind of where I don't get mad at myself like I used to. And I'm able to get into conversations with people that turn into beautiful conversations and sometimes, you know, beautiful relationships, whether they're business and personal. And it was all about just releasing myself from that, you know, that book Can't Hurt Me. That's what it's talking about. Yeah. You can't hurt me. If I give you all my demons and all my scars and put it all out on the table and I show you what vulnerability is, which is courage and action. Honestly, I'm trusting you with this information, but I don't need you to understand it. I don't need you to, you know, give me a thumbs up. I just want to let you know this is who I am. And it's kind of like if you've ever seen that movie 8 Mile way back in the day where Eminem's like, you know, he's living in a trailer park. He has a mom that's, you know, into prostitution. He's just got a really shitty life. And he's an up and coming rapper and he's getting crushed every time that he's going out and doing these raps against like Mekhi Phifer and he's just killing him. And at the end of the movie, he's like, you know what? Screw that. I'm going to say all the things you're going to diss me about. You know, I am poor. I live in a trailer park. My mom is
now what do you got?
Right. And then and then the guy has 0 bullets in his gun, his metaphorical gun. And he's like, now he can go on the offensive. Yeah. And that's what happened with me and Goggins. That first book, Can't Hurt Me. I listened to it twice. Beautiful listen. Beautiful book. He just came out with another book. I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but I might get into that, but just, it's a beautiful journey when you have these moments come into your life and you let them inspire and change you for the better.
I think you said something. There's a bunch of things that were really important there, but like one of the things I want to hone in on is that leading with vulnerability. Yep. And you know, it's so important because so many people have the same questions, the same concerns, and it kind of, in a weird way, it goes full circle back to our previous conversation around like groupthink and how does like a My Lai happen, and how does like a Abu Ghraib happen, and how do these things happen where we do have this kind of weird anthropology thing going where you have this mass of people going and they're going in that direction, but don't necessarily discount the power of one person going in this direction and all of a sudden everybody going, hey, wait a minute, I'll follow that person. Like there's not this kind of fallacy of critical mass. Yep. And I jokingly talk about this I call it the wedding dancer. You go to a wedding, a lot of new people just meeting for the first time. Everybody's kind of maybe had a couple drinks, but isn't really messed up yet. And the dance floor is always empty.
Oh yeah,
there's always like one person, one just outgoing girl or one outgoing guy who's like, "Fuck it, I'm dancing."
Yep.
And they go out there and dance, and within seconds, the entire dance floor is
yes.
full. You just need that. And the critical mass is not on the dance floor. Critical mass is sitting down. They're nervous. They don't want to dance. They don't want anybody to make fun of them. And there's one person who's like, watch this. And and it's not even about the crowd. It's just what they want to do. They feel in their spirit that they just want to dance. It's great music. They're at a wedding. Hey, you know what? Kid's got a babysitter. I'm going to go fucking dance. And then everyone else is like, look at this. I want to dance. And so like never discredit how powerful displaying your vulnerabilities can be, yes. Not just to like connecting with people on a very real level, but how much it can inspire the masses to go in a different direction. It's not always, hey, I'm a big tough guy, come follow me. Sometimes it's like, man, I'm nervous as shit, but I'm going to do it anyways. Yep. And everyone's like, I'm nervous too. Let's do it. And like, I think that to me is so powerful because it just takes one person.
Yeah,
it's one person to say, I'm gonna rush the cockpit. You know what? We might all die going, but I'm gonna do it. And then like a couple other people sitting by, like you go, I go, I'm with you. Let's do it. And it wasn't just one person saying let's roll. He was saying let's roll to a group of people who were inspired by one person.
Yes,
who all decided not on my watch. And so you think about the things you see in society. Someone getting mugged. You think about someone, you see someone steal something and you think, well, not my problem. No, it is your problem. Yes. So whether it's just leading with your own mistakes to make sure you can allow people a safe space to share their own mistakes, whether it's getting people to dance at a wedding, whether it's saying no to abuse, like you got to put yourself out there. And I think leading with that kind of just vulnerable, this is me, take it or leave it. It's one of the most powerful weapons we have to like really disarm people's bullshit and maybe find ourselves in a better place.
Motion creates
authentic place.
Right. And it's like the idea behind it is motion creates emotion. It's There's this video, it's been viral for years, but there's a guy, I want to say it's like a skinny white dude. And he's on this grassy field. I think there's a little bit of a hill. And there's a bunch of people sitting around him, and he's like doing the Bernie. He's all of a sudden just dancing by himself. And at that point, he's the first mover. But it wasn't until we had one more person, like an early adopter, that wasn't the first, but the second. Yeah. The second person was being a leader too. So he was a leader going out there saying, I want to dance. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to go enjoy life. But then that the number two was almost equally as powerful because the number two created the domino effect. And then as soon as the number two got over there and started dancing, dozens of people. And then eventually, if you weren't dancing, you were the weirdo.
You were the odd one.
Right?
I love that.
It's a beautiful illustration of everything you just said, man. It's like, we all have that calling and that inspiration. But are we going to be courageous and vulnerable to say, you know what? I don't care what people think. I'm doing this for me. Yeah. And then you'll see the tides turn. It's really interesting, the human condition. Going to what we're doing today in terms of your career, right? For Funware and if you're still doing any kind of VC work, talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about the inception of Funware, what Funware actually does, and kind of where you see the vision of it going.
Yeah, it pun intended. It's been fun, So and it's weird how life works. So when I was still doing, my career has kind of been, Army, angel investing. I ran one of the largest angel networks in the world. I grew it to be the largest angel network in the world. A group called Central Texas Angel Network. From the time I took it over to when I ran it, and then ended up using that as a kind of a launch pad to start my own venture fund. We focused on tech-enabled healthcare. So I spent about a decade investing in kind of healthcare startups, mostly around technology.
Yes.
Ironically, though, one of the very first angel deals, I helped lead, I was a $1.5 million seed round to start this company called Funware. And so back in 2009, helped start the company, and then always kept in touch. Both me and the founder, both kind of, ex-Army, ex-Rangers, kind of did a couple things together, but kind of just kept in contact from, more of like a friendship than anything else. About 10 years later, I was doing a lot of stuff in healthcare technology, a lot of stuff in blockchain technology. We kind of started riffing on kind of where the company was at this point. He asked me if I wanted to invest again. So I put about $3 million into the last private round right before we went public. And then the old COO needed to take a step back for some personal health reasons. And he said, hey, you're tired of doing this VC thing. You want to kind of do this thing with me full time. And I surprised myself. I was like, yeah, it was a quick answer. And it was one, because being a VC is fun, but it's like you're always a backseat driver. If you're investing in the right entrepreneurs, you shouldn't be shotgun and you shouldn't be grabbing the steering wheel. You need to be backseat, providing some guidance. But that's hard for somebody who's kind of type A, always wants to be in control.
Right. Hands on.
Hey, you're going the wrong way. Give me the wheel. So, that was always, I think I was about at my patience with being a VC. I was like, you know what? I missed one team, one fight. So kind of holistically, I was excited to get back into a company with a team and kind of, follow me type of vibe. But it would take a special company for me to want to do that. A big problem. I didn't want to just, commercialize another means to, track Kim Kardashian's ass. I wanted something that was actually special, that could actually define where we were headed, either in technology or society or whatever. And so what Funware got started doing was just building mobile applications. So we built the first NFL app, the first NASCAR app. We did all of Fox's mobile applications. We did the Sochi Olympics. We've done hospitals, hotels, stadiums, anywhere there's like a very complex user base that needs a very robust, mobile ecosystem. We do that. Fast forward to today, it's more about this idea of digital transformation. So if you think about the metaverse is cool, I get it from a marketing perspective. But whether it's, bandwidth issues, form factor, consumer acceptance, the fact I don't want to wear goggles for, 5 hours out of my life, it's a marketing gimmick right now. It's not, we're not at Ready Player One yet. And we probably won't be, for a very long time, 15, 20, 25 years. What I think is interesting, though, I don't think people really want to escape the real world as much as we think they do. It makes for a good movie, but so did Flying Cars. The reality is we don't trust people on the street, much less flying. And so there's a reason why we don't have flying cars, even though it makes for really cool movies. Same thing with the metaverse. I don't think people really want to escape the real world for a virtual one. I think they just want the real world to be a better one.
Sure.
And I think we have an opportunity to tech enable the real world in ways that get more out of our real life experiences. And so that's what Funware is all about. It's all about, how do we take all the technology in the real world? How do we take all the data in the virtual world? And how do we enhance real world experiences? So and a lot of what our stuff is built around location. So we can find a mobile device inside a building the same way satellites can find a mobile device outside a building. And so we create really rich experiences built around context. So who are you? Where are you? What's important to you? And what content do we need to give you to make your life better? And so we just deployed at Atlantis in the Bahamas. It's an entire island. It's 140 acres. It's 5 distinct properties. And so anywhere on that island, you can, we have basically a buy now button. You can buy anything you want. You can find your way around the island. You can engage with any of the stuff around the island, from the aquarium to the water park to the stores, the restaurants, all in a mobile ecosystem. But we also do hospitals. So tech enabling the entire continuum of care. So you want access to all your medical records, bill pay, discharge, everything you could ever want to do for your care in the palm of your hand, no matter how many systems may run that. So we create an interoperability layer. So it doesn't matter how many different vendors a venue works with. Like, different people will do bill pay, different people will do pharmacy, different people will do electronic medical records. We bring that all into one seamless UI, one seamless mobile app, so that you can get access to everything you need, while you're in a property. So while you're in a hotel, while you're at a hospital, while you're at, on a vacation to Atlantis, we kind of give you the technology to get more out of those real world experiences. So it's cool. It's where things are headed. I think everything right now is so passive. Like if you think about the last time you went to a grocery store, did technology really serve you? And if your phone's in your pocket, like you're just walking around buying shit. The goal is to, try to use technology better, so that you can find products maybe that you didn't even know you needed. You can find your way around the facility better. You can just be more efficient with, checking out. And so a lot of that is kind of exciting for us. And it's just beginning to become a thing.
When you first took over officially as COO in 2009 until today, you're looking at, 13, 12 years later. What have you seen that's been beautiful to witness in terms of the growth inside the company, and how has the company scaled in terms of, leadership, and then also, has it grown from X amount of people to where it is today? Like how many people do you have working there today?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of been all over the place. We've gone, like every other company. That's probably the most beautiful thing is like, how do you respond to things you didn't plan for? How do you respond to change? We went like this, like this, like this. And during the pandemic, a lot has changed. And so, I think at the most we've ever had 300 plus employees. Right now we have about 100. And so, like everybody else, during the pandemic, we had to scale down. And I think that's tough. You learn a lot about, you don't want to lose anybody, but sometimes, you have to. And, it's interesting not only to have to deal with that kind of, human condition, that human relationship, that social contract, but then also the people that, stick around and how they've stepped up in a big way. And so you learn a lot about leadership when you're kind of going through, tough times, and how do you, really pivot the company in certain ways where the market is headed. How do you respond to things you didn't really, that maybe kind of disprove an early hypothesis? And then, we've gone through lawsuits, we've gone through revenues up here, revenues down here, a couple months from going, bankrupt, or, not maybe close to bankruptcy, but being really, really thin on cash, to then having windfalls. We $65 million in a day, about this time last year. And so it's been all over the map, but it's really exciting to kind of work with people. And I think that's what I miss as a VC, working with people on those problems. When the shit hits the fan, you all rally around each other and you just get to work. And I think that's been really exciting.
When you look at the future in a perfect world, right? Obviously, that's not a perfect world, but if you could architect the vision, which I'm sure you're very heavy-handed in, to say where Phunware will be at its most beautiful, optimal point, and then also, for you and your personal journey, what does that look like for the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Yeah, so what's really cool about what we're doing, so, the core platform allows us to deliver the right content to the right person on the right screen at the right time in the right place. But all of that is kind of built on data. So we have this really cool location engine. We're really good at mobile. So how do we enhance and inform real world experiences? But we have this also other unique opportunity kind of riding in parallel around blockchain. And so most people, 95% of people don't need blockchain, shouldn't be using it. They're just chasing a fad. And that was probably true for the internet when it first began too. Most people did not need a .com, but they were throwing .com on everything they possibly could. That's what happens when you have kind of disruptive technology. But I always say, like, blockchain is this big house of cards built on fraud, confusion, and ego. And it's still probably one of the most compelling innovations to reach the global economy since the Medici's commercialized double entry accounting. I mean, it's phenomenal potential. And it's also a complete fucking mess.
Yeah.
That's what you should expect.
Isn't that indicative of the human condition right now?
Exactly.
Beautiful potential
All this
and a complete
potential,
fucking mess.
total fucking mess. Yeah. Aliens are like looking at us going, can you guys figure this out already?
Right. Come join us.
Yeah. So, I think what's blockchain for us is really exciting because I think about like 10, 20, 30 years from now, what could happen. So like, I think blockchain will play a role in what we do. And the reason why I think that is we live in a mobile first world. It's quickly feeling mobile only. So we kind of got the mobile software. It's interesting, but like, where do we go with that? Bitcoin proved that you didn't need an intermediary in the middle to transact value, right? So it's like, hey, now is Bitcoin going to take over the banking system? Absolutely fucking not. No way. Banks will use it. Other people will use it. It'll just be
they're too big to fail.
Thing. So you can choose to use a bank or you can choose to use Bitcoin. But a lot of people are never going to use Bitcoin because if you fat finger that, there's no do-over button. And that scares the shit out of people. That finality freaks people out. So, but it's cool. It's proven, right? There is, if I wanted to send you $1 million without having to go through wire fees and banking approvals and everything else, and you had a Bitcoin wallet address, I could do that. Nobody could tell me not to. That's pretty cool. That's going to happen with data. Like right now, Facebook, Google, credit agencies, they've got all this data and they're the only game in town and consumers, really can't do anything about it. But you're starting to see all these new regulations coming out around privacy and like location sharing and, what can you use and what can you not use? And did you get consent for that data? Yes. It's a really interesting opportunity for blockchain. Like, can you do for data what Bitcoin did for finance? Can you create a new model that allows you to control your data? And then if a brand wants to engage you or use your data to either enrich a media campaign or do personalized advertising or personalized experiences, they don't go to Facebook, they don't go to Google, they don't go to a credit agency, they go to Jesse. Like, hey, Jesse, we really want to sell you this car ad. You interested? And they're like, yeah, sure, send it to me. Cool. Like, why can't you have that kind of exchange? People love to buy. They hate to be sold.
100%.
People hate to feel like they're being surveilled or exploited, but they understand that they want curated, personalized experiences.
Yep.
So there's an opportunity for a new model that allows people to control the tenor and the cadence of those engagements. Like, look, I might want to buy a car and I don't mind learning about cars, but after I buy a car, leave me alone.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't want to keep getting car advertisements. I still get advertisements from the Navy. I'm like, dude, not your target market. Like, stop. And so I think there's this really interesting opportunity to marry all of the data that we have in the virtual world with these real world experiences through mobile applications, but make sure the consumer kind of controls that relationship, controls that engagement. And I think that'd be really cool because I think we get better data. We'd spend less money on advertising to people that don't want to be advertised to. And you'd have this entirely new relationship between brands and consumers.
It's a beautiful vision, and it's really tying together, all facets, especially with the end user, the consumer being, or I guess we're technically the product if you look at us that way. But, as far as the end user, us individuals curating our own kind of experience, having a little bit more say what happens with our information, with our tracking of our location, with, things that pop up based on what we're talking about. If we talk about kittens all day, we're going to get kitten ads, like all these types of things, having that kind of, a little bit more of a say so, right? I get for a lot of people. And then, like you said, people love to buy, they hate being sold. Right. And it's an idea of, having a more, mindful, conscious way of doing business while still being able to collect data and do service what you need to service. I think that's a beautiful vision, brother. And then that last piece, as far as for you on the personal side, I know this is tied into your personal life, but for you personally, where do you want your journey to where could you rest your head 20, 30, 40 years from now? Be like, I've had a great life. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, obviously got to say the easy stuff. I want to be a great husband, great father to my child and hopefully children. But if we're getting at big vision stuff, I hate to say this because it sounds bad. Like the human condition, I like to think about it philosophically. Do I think that I'm going to solve that in a material way other than employing people? Probably not. When somebody tells me, hey, this person passed, my grandfather, my father passed. I'm like, oh, that sucks. And someone says like, hey, I had to put down my dog. Forget it, man. Like when animals to me, like that's my jam. That's the cross I'll carry. So I will absolutely take the majority of my wealth and I will, apply it to most likely animal causes. Small diversion to special needs. I do have my dad taught special needs kids, as a teacher for a long part of my, kind of maturation process. And so I have a special place in my heart for people with special needs who maybe don't get the opportunity to do fun stuff and cool stuff. And, I used to take people, a lot of kids he taught and go do stuff with them and kind of give them experiences that they might not otherwise have. And so that's always been special to me. And I continue to try to do that today. But I'm going to have Second Chance Puppy Ranch. And so, I want to have,
hell yeah.
It's like, instead of that cat lady, thing, I'm going to have thousands of dogs that you don't ever need to adopt them. I'll take care of them. I'll hire people to, walk them and teach them and have a big lake for them. And so Second Chance Puppy Ranch, and bovine sanctuary, because one of my friends, in an effort to try to convince me to stop eating meat, he just kept sending me videos of cows acting like dogs. And so now mentally, I think cows are just big dogs. And so now I'm cows as well. So cows and dogs sanctuary, 30 years. That's where you'll find me.
Have you stopped eating meat?
I have.
Wow. Okay.
So here's the thing. And certain health benefits. I mean, I work out all the time. I haven't lost any size, so I definitely am glad that that's not been a thing. I don't eat beef or pork.
Okay, but fish.
I eat fish and chicken.
Yeah,
and
great.
So
that's healthier for you.
I'm not a vegan. I'm not just a pescatarian. For me, it's all about once I associate you with a dog, like that, I don't have that same like emotional bond to a chicken or a fish. But I have a huge emotional bond to like cows, pigs. And because my friends would send me videos of them looking like dogs. So they were like, look, I know I can't get you to stop eating all meat, but at least I can get you to stop eating this. And so I haven't eaten beef in probably 5 years. I haven't eaten pork in probably 8 or 9.
Wow. I know we got only about a couple minutes left before we hop off here. As far as some of the health benefits that you have noticed in terms of maybe sleeping or day-to-day processes that are more improved, what are the couple biggest things you've noticed from stop eating the beef and the pork?
I probably just that sense of, I think people will say this all the time, like, and I'm a light food eater now anyways, but like, I just felt like lethargic.
Yeah.
Like, I just like eating heavy food to me is just not my thing. Like give me, light, salads, broth, people, what I eat on a normal basis, people are like, oh, you're dieting. Like, no, it's just what I love. Like, love how, from running to working out, like I never feel like full and weighted down and heavy. And so I think that's probably, I've always been in shape. I've always been kind of a passionate health and fitness. But yeah, I just, there's nothing, I don't do dairy either. And so, but I feel great. And so like, I think it's probably more the reverse of that. I've worked out my whole life. I've always been a pretty, big guy. And people are always like, oh, you got to eat meat to do that. You got to eat this to do that. It's like, no, you don't. Like no. I've never done steroids. I've never cheated, because for me, it's like about being the healthiest person I can be.
Yes.
And I've looked the same. You can look at pictures of me all the way back 20 years. I look the same as I did 20 years, same muscle mass, same physique.
Yep.
It's not eating beef has not affected that at all. So
I think it's important too, as we hop off here, just to recognize that, to be, thinking about people when they talk about rich and what does that mean? For me, I was in wealth management for a long time, and I saw a lot of rich people that had money, but they were poor in every other aspect of life.
Yeah.
To me, wealthy people have health, they have time, and obviously they have money and resources. And so be able to have a healthy body, a healthy mind, a healthy spirit really amplifies your effect on people as a COO, as a husband, as a future dad. I mean, you can't give from an empty cup. And if you're healthy and you're vibrant and you're full of life, I mean, that's a life well lived, brother.
Absolutely, man. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, you see so many, sad stories about, these suicides of in mental health. We didn't even touch on that, especially in the military. Mental health is such an important thing that people need to be mindful of, especially people around them that you may not even like recognize the signals when you start to see them. But it's dangerous. Depression is a scary thing, and it doesn't mean just because you're rich that you're going to be happy. Look at Robin Williams. Look at oh, I'm a DJ. Oh, I'm a comedian. It's like they still had their demons, and I think you're exactly right. Like that constant, your comparison other is so important. If you're constantly comparing yourself to that girl on Instagram or that guy on a private jet who's probably half of it's fake anyways, you really got to do a gut check and say, that's not what's important. You're exactly right. It's just living a life, well lived is the most important thing. And, the crazy thing is the better you do that and the happier you are, a lot of the opportunity comes and like you actually
flows.
You'll be more successful. It's when you're I always think about dissonance and resonance. It's like when you're going against the frequency of your own vibe, that's when you create all this friction. And there's a famous quote: "No one ever changes until pain of remaining the same outweighs the pain of change." And when you try to make that relationship work, or make that job work, or you just get stuck in something that isn't right for you, that's when all the bad shit happens. You get sick. You push people away that you shouldn't. And
right.
So, really getting to the truth of who you are and what makes you happy, you will make others happy, and you will ultimately be more successful.
Light the world up by your light, brother. Couldn't say it any better than that. You're the man, dude. And I appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your journey. I'm looking forward to seeing where our journey goes, because there's a lot of connective tissue, and I'm sure we could support each other as we go along, brother. But I want to be the first listener and viewer to say thank you for being you, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on here. Thank you for, putting all these together and doing so much to kind of share, all the stories with more people. I commend you for doing it and putting yourself out there and humbled to play a small part in that story.
You're the man, dude. Likewise, I appreciate you. And stay tuned for those listening and watching for the next episode of the Jesse T Show.